Hopefully it was another, productive night for us. Pretty active, moved around, made a number of different trades there. I think the thought process going in, we had spent some time during the day here kind of putting together some different clusters and groups of players and pockets of players. There were probably about, say, 10 to 15 players that we had earmarked, and their grades were reflective of if we had the opportunity to pick them in this round, like we thought that it made sense to do. So some of this was positioning, some of this was supply and demand, like it usually is. And in the end, we made the three picks. We went in with three, made three, but just kind of moved around to kind of get to the same end point here today. So I'll kind of start with 37. So I think we were pretty intent on picking at 37. There was a little bit of discussion or dialogue, with some folks behind us about maybe moving back, however many slots it was. But we felt where we were positioned, and if we moved back, call it 6 to 8 slots, that 3 or 4 of the players that we made earmarked, there's a good chance we would have lost them. So instead of trying to make, a decision that we might look back and say, you know what, that doesn't make a lot of sense, try to just pick a good football player. I think we're starting the Houston Texans Community College by picking, a lot of kids that kind of grew up here right around the corner. We called Petrie, asked him where he was. He's like, yeah, I'm 5 minutes down the street. It's like, well, he probably would have sprinted to the stadium. So, I would say, and we'll get to John here in a minute, but I would say those two players are they're football playing Jessies. I mean, they're damn good football players, and they've come from good programs. What Coach Aranda has done at Baylor, I'd say it's because of players and people like Jalen Petrie. He meant as much as anybody to that program. He plays with the hair on fire, versatile player. They used him a little bit inside in the slot. He played safety, so he has some position versatility. I think he might have a role in a kicking game. So tough, instinctive football player, finds a football and loves playing football. His energy was infectious when he was in the building. I'd say, like you all talked to Kenyon and Derek earlier. I'd say Jalen falls in the category of embodying the types of people and players that we want to have in this building. Kind of their vigor, enjoy playing football, and you see it in the way that he plays. I mean, he plays with his hair on fire. So made the pick with him there at 37, and then where we were positioned 68 and 80. So you're talking, I don't know, however many. I'm not a math major, but it's a lot of picks. I mean, it's 35, 40 picks, whatever it was. So we were fairly intent of moving back into the second round. Like we felt we were going to do that regardless. I wouldn't say it was necessarily about a specific player or position. It was more about pockets of players and groups of players with the same methodology and the same mindset. So going from 68 back to 44 there with Cleveland, had to give up the fourth, whatever it was, and the fifth, or I can't remember exactly what it was. So, but it was really about positioning to try to get in a slot. It wasn't necessarily we were trying to jump a team or get ahead of anybody. It was kind of this same cluster of players that we were talking about that were graded at a certain level. By the time we got to 68, I mean, there was no way in hell we were going to see them. So, it was, all right, let's see if we can move. Let's see if we can get in there, and let's see if we can pick. So, went ahead and did that and, picked John. I would say, you'll spend some time with him, get to know him, but his story, I'd say, is probably as unique as anybody in a draft. Very worldly. I mean, this kid is awesome kid. Very smart, very studious, tough as nails. I mean, some of the things that he did at Alabama and some of the things that he endured and played with, I mean, were, just no normal people would do it. So this guy's level of toughness is exceptional. He was a really, really productive player for them. Has some position flexibility, position versatility. I know there's questions. When's he going to be ready? When's he going to be available? I wouldn't put too much stock in what he said. I think when he's ready, he's ready. Whenever that is, it is. We're not going to rush him. We're not going to push him. So when he's ready, when he's physically able, we feel that, it's the right thing to do, then he'll be on the field. Until then, he'll do everything he can to get himself to that point. So I certainly wouldn't put any timetable on it. I wouldn't put any expectation on it. When he's ready, he'll be ready. But another player that I would say, we like probably as much as any football player in the draft. When you watch him play, he plays a receiver with a mindset mentality that, is, I'd say a little bit different. And when J-Mo went down, or had the penalty in the Alabama game, they lost J-Mo, and really it came down to Mechie, and when they needed a play, it came down to Mechie. And I think he caught, 11, 12 balls in that game, and he was going against a really good player, McCreary, who I believe the Titans took. So kind of like we talked a little bit earlier, and even last night, seeing good on good, Mechie on guys like McCreary, Mechie on guys like Stingley. That's important. See him against good level of competition. So excited to have John. And then with Christian, so we were positioned there at 80, and Christian was actually one of the players we kind of had in our cluster from the start of the day. So he was in that group. So the fact that he was still kind of milling around there for whatever reason, it's not for me to judge or try to figure out why. I'd say fit the profile in terms of what we want at linebacker. I don't think anybody was more ecstatic than Lovey about that pick, but talking about a guy 6 foot, 225, 230 pounds, runs 4.4. So it fits a profile of kind of what we want to do defensively, that position. Kind of unique story as well. Kind of basically didn't play linebacker until he showed up on campus in Alabama. Was a safety, played in the secondary, and then he moved down. But I think that's actually reflective of kind of Nick's genius in terms of how he sees the game, how he uses people, where the game is going. Trying to stop offenses like Ole Miss, trying to stop teams that spread the field, have a lot of space. You need players in turn that can help defend that space. So I'd say Christian kind of falls into that category. Should be able to help us a little bit in the kicking game. So I know he was actually in Dallas. We talked. The question was asked last night. About when you get on the phone with these kids and just what does that mean? I'd say in his particular case, he cried in a good way, but he was so, I would say, just ready for this kind of to be over in a good way. I think everybody felt good about that pick. So, we picked, I'd say, good football players that are awesome people, that have played for some really good programs. Again, what Coach Aranda's done and, what Nick has done at Alabama speaks for itself. So they're well-trained, well-schooled, but the reality is they're starting over. So now they're Houston Texans. So now they're going to have to learn our program and, not necessarily change anything that they're doing, but just do the things that we ask of them on a day-to-day basis. And that hopefully will be good enough. So.
We're going to start with Adam in the back, and we'll go to Aaron.
I think you've raved about these guys' personalities and being good guys and being part of this family without revealing your secrets. How much are you able to learn about their personalities? Specifically, the guys from good programs who have had a lot of success in their careers. Maybe how well do you know that maybe if things aren't perfect early on?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers. We actually, that was a question, or we've asked some people that have played in some programs. Like the reality is, look, our program is where it is for the time being. We haven't had as much success as we all would have hoped here over the last so many years. So how would you handle that transition or situation? So you're just trying to get a gauge and a feel to their overall personality and just who they are as people, because who they are as people is going to translate over to who they are as football players. So you're just trying to see, look, this is going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. And, let's say the league is set up for everybody to basically be about 500. So some of these players are going to lose more games in one season than they lose in their whole career. It's just the reality of the NFL. Like, we can't change that. So are you going to be able to get up? You're going to be able to deal with it. You're going to be able to, whatever happens on Sunday, come in the next day, turn the page, and get ready for the next week. And have enough, I would say, competitive stamina, mental toughness to be able to move forward, because that's what it's going to take to have a good team over the course of however many weeks it is. So how do you measure that? You really, it's difficult to measure tangibly. You sort of have to get a feel. You sort of have to do a deep dive. You sort of have to try to gather as much information as you can in that area, and then you have to see it. And then you have to feel, look, some kids are going to come in, they're going to BS you, and, you have to figure out, all right, are this really who they are, or is this something a little bit different? And some kids are, I'd say, true to who they are, I would just say this: I don't think Petrie, Mechie, and Christian Harris are going to change who they are if we lose some football games. I think they're probably going to be motivated to say, all right, what the hell do we have to do to figure it out to make it better? So that's the kind of attitude and the type of approach that you want to have, and that's what their job is. That's what our job is. It's to fix problems. It's to not bitch and moan if things don't go the way that we want it to, and come up with solutions. So not to be contrite, but that's the truth.
Well, Aaron and Sarah.
To add speed, leadership, and some instincts with Petrie and Harris, how much does that mean for you guys as you sort of try to get the defense to the level that you want? Thank you.
Yeah. Look, we have a lot of areas that we can improve as an overall team, and that's what the offseason is for. So, hopefully that can translate into results on the field. But, defensive football is about being fast, tackling, being instinctive, and then having a certain skill set and being able to do the things that are required of your position. So, that's what defense entails. So, can you stop in critical situations? Can you keep them can you get off the field? Tackling, and say, Lovey's talked about it from the day he walked in the door. It's about taking the ball away. So we want to play with an aggressive mindset and mentality. And it's a passing league. You have to be able to defend the run, but it's a passing league, and you got to be able to defend space. So how do you defend space? You have guys that are fast, that are instinctive, that can find the ball and can tackle. So who are those players? That's our job to find them and to fit them in and use them and deploy them accordingly.
Sarah and Christy.
You've talked a lot about the program you want to build here and that everyone wants to build here. Is there anything that's changed from a year ago, your first draft year, with how you bring rookies into the building, kind of integrate them with your team and set them up for success?
I wouldn't say it necessarily changed. I'd say there's probably elements and areas within the process that we've probably made some subtle adjustments and changes, and maybe there's more information, or maybe we found a different way to do something, or maybe whether technology gives us a little more information about how we assess the players, biomechanically or athletically. So, but the idea is to fill the building with as many people possible on as many levels and layers as possible. So it's not just about players. If you have a bunch of players with that mindset and mentality, but you don't have people on your staff that have the same thought process and mentality, then, maybe it's not going to work the way that you hope. So we all have a common goal. We're all trying to achieve the same thing. We all have to depend on, rely on each other. So that personal accountability to each other at all levels of the program, that's what's going to kind of lift us to a level that we think is better than where it is, and that we hopefully can sustain for, an extended period of time.
Obviously, I know it's hard to predict, but do you believe that these guys that you've picked, especially on defense so early, are going to be able to have an immediate impact on improving your defense?
Yeah, I wouldn't put a timetable on it. I think once they get here, we'll, assess kind of where they are, how much they can handle, how far along they are. So it's just if you go out there, just do your job and make improvement and take coaching, and you perform your job at a level that is better than anybody else at that position, then you're going to play. If there's somebody better at that position that does it better than you, then they're going to play. So then if you're not playing, what's your supplemental role? So if you're not playing on defense, look, you're either a starter on offense, you're a starter on defense, or you're a starter in the kicking game. So we have 48 players that we take to the game on a week-to-week basis. Call it, 22 on offense or defense, respective side of the ball, and 3 specialists. So, what's your role? How are you going to get to the game? How are you going to help us? So if you're really good on defense and that's your role, then be really good on defense. If you're more of a role player defensively or offensively, you're the 7th lineman, then that's your role. And then, whatever role you have in the other areas of the field, then, our job is to try to figure out who those players are. So whenever that is, I would say, look, I've been a part of plenty of good teams where players that you drafted in the 3rd and 4th round were inactive for an entire season. So, James White, let's, go back and look at his career in New England. He didn't play as a rookie, literally. He was a 4th-round pick, and, we thought he was a good player. 9 years later, I'd say he's been one of the best sub-backs probably in the history of that program. So what they do in their first year, I don't think we can get too caught up in that. So people change, people grow, they learn at different stages. Maybe they have some setback. So there's a lot of things they're going to handle. I would say let's start with the season. There's 21 games, 22 games. So a lot of these guys are going to be playing double of their season. So how do you handle that volume? There's a lot of things that go into it. So the things that you do away from the field, those are more importantly going to dictate what you actually do on the field. So what's your level of commitment to actually being a good player, being a good pro? Are you going to do everything that's required? I'd say those things are more important than let's just roll it out there and kind of see what they do on the field, how high they can jump and how fast they can run.
kind of look at the big board ahead, and especially going in tomorrow, if there is no run at a certain position, does that maybe change your strategy if you aren't seeing a multitude of players that maybe you like at a certain position? Does that maybe change how you approach the draft with certain picks or trade-ups or trade-downs?
As far as being position specific, or
Like position, if you're not seeing like a run on running backs, does that maybe change your draft strategy in waiting to maybe select one later on?
yeah, I don't think you make it about a specific position. So I would say when you look at kind of what happened today, there was, I don't know, it was 12 to 14 receivers that went. I don't know the exact number, but it was a pretty significant amount. So what you're starting to see is you're kind of starting to see players come from different areas, and kind of beauty is the eye of the beholder. And so whatever value that team puts on the player, I think you're at that point. Are there players that are still available that we think can help us? Absolutely. So, how big of a role, or what does that look like relative to some other player in another position? That's what we're going to look at and evaluate here tonight. So, or tomorrow morning. So we're slated to pick there at 107. Then we have the 2 5th-round picks and then the 2 6th-round picks. So if we pick at 107, then there's a little bit of a gap until kind of the 150s, 160s, whatever it is. So there's still certain players that, we feel can come in here and help our football team to some degree. So just try to make a good decision, pick the right player, and then keep it moving.
And you mentioned at the beginning of the day you'll had about 10 to 15 players in a cluster that you expected to be there. How diverse is that group position-wise, and maybe even specific to running back? How do y'all have those discussions throughout the day about where to go with that, and how y'all address that in the future?
Yeah, it's all grade specific. So whatever the player's grade is, whatever we valued them, then, okay, these guys are the green group, if you will, just using numbers or not using colors. So, all right, how many players within that group? All right, are there more of one position than another? What's the likelihood that you have the opportunity to pick this player if you wait? So those are all discussions you have. And look, the reality is you're going to pick one player. So you're not going to get everything that you hope or that you want. It's just the reality of it. Be ready to pivot, go to the next thing. Hopefully you've evaluated and identified those players the right way. I'd say, again, just the tip of the cap to, Lip, John and Mosaic, Tom Hayden, like our scouting staff, like they did an awesome job. They really did the last couple of days. And I think what we've done is reflective of their work and the work that they've done, and, kind of the things that we've done during the course of the day leading up to yesterday, the things that we've done leading up to today. Do the same thing tomorrow morning. We'll get together as an entire staff and say, all right, here are our options, here are some things, and then maybe start to plan ahead a little bit towards undrafted free agency. All right, look, here, there's no players left at this position. All right, if we're going to add some players to the team, all right, they're going to have to come from another group. All right, let's maybe start to do a little bit of homework, make sure we're organized and ahead on that. So I think that'll be the plan of action.
Just to kind of follow up, and maybe in the thinking of it, this is the second day where a couple of teams have moved ahead of you guys. How much did that influence how y'all eventually picked?
Yeah, not at all. That's just, I'd say, happenstance. I think, honestly, a lot of that's kind of made up. Like, oh, yeah, this team jumped in front of this team because they knew they were going to pick. I'm not that smart. So, they'd move in front of us, they move in front of us. That's why you kind of have to be prepared. All right, if one of those guys gets picked, all right, who's the next guy? Just go to the next guy. There's not enough time. There's 7 minutes to, cry over spilled milk, so we're not going to do that.
Tomorrow's rounds 4 through 7. Then, of course, that's the undrafted free agency pool. So, do you guys evaluate those players differently from, let's say, the players that you guys selected from rounds 1 through 3, or it still goes into the whole entire situation?
Great question. Not at all. We spend as much time evaluating those players as we do the guys that we picked yesterday. So that's where just the how much depth and just how much time and just in totality understanding kind of 1 through, 300 to 250, 300 players. That's our job. That's our responsibility. So to kind of have an understanding. So, all right, if that group of players goes, all right, we have this other group of players over here. I'd probably spend as much time on that group as I do on, guys like Derek Stingley. So, and, I think there's some other things that we're doing with the team, other players that aren't here, I'd say that are in the league that, I think, probably come Monday, like they're going to show up on our team. So, whether or not that affects the planning or goes into decision making, I wouldn't say that it does, but we kind of had that in our back pocket here a little bit. So, the way it looks today might look a little bit different come Monday. So,
Nick, it was easy to take a guy like Derek Stingley Jr. coming off an injury because you got a chance to evaluate him during a pro day. But how about a guy that you haven't seen, in the past couple of months in Michi, and coming off the injury that he's coming off of? When you go to evaluate and to draft like that, how much of the medical team is there with you evaluating, telling you what is going to or what could potentially happen down the line?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have those meeting. We have a medical meeting, a week or two before the draft, and we go through a pretty lengthy list of players. And their job and responsibility is to say, here's the player's condition, here's how we project that player, here's what we think it is. And I would say with most injured players, in every situation, every injury is different, at some point there's going to be a recovery from whatever injury they have. So there's a certain timetable that's going to be associated with that. And we've talked about this previously. Anytime you draft a player, bring a player into the building, you're essentially saying we're comfortable with the situation, we understand what it is. I think the most important thing is for all of us to understand what it is, where he is, and then be able to put an action plan in place to give that player an opportunity to get back to his optimum level of performance. So the medical team is important as it pertains specifically to players that might have some injury, whether it's history or it's condition. There was a few players, or again, it was Jabo was kind of in that situation as well. Going back to yesterday with Jameson Williams. So you take the information. Here's what it is. Here's what the expectation is. Okay, what's the nature of the injury? Okay, here's the recovery. Okay, he'll be ready by X. Okay, great. All right, then you sort of plan accordingly. So that's kind of how we handle it. But it's definitely a portion of each of players' evaluation. Some players it has a little bit more relevance than others.
Just quickly thinking
back to the head coach hiring process, you had Lovie Smith involved throughout it, ultimately end up hiring him. You had 3 months working with him through draft preparations and everything like that. Now 2 nights of working with him on draft night, and you've been in a lot of draft rooms with different types of people. What was it like these last 2 days specifically working with Lovie, talking things out with him specifically? And the second part of the question is, was the genesis of the hug that you guys had shared on social media the Christian Harris pick?
Yeah, that was he was excited, so I figured he needed a hug, I think, after that. So, no, have respect for his perspective on players. He's seen a lot of players. He's coached a lot of players. He's the head coach of the football team. He should have input. But he is also very receptive to our viewpoints on players and the rationale that goes into it. So but that's part of the give and take. And we're not going to agree on everything. I'm not going to agree with the coaches on everything. You'd have to try to create some modicum of balance and to create an effort so that everybody understands, everybody hears the opinion of the other party, and then be respectful of that. And then in the end, it's an organizational decision that we're making, and we all have to be comfortable. And then our job is to, once a player comes in, do everything in our power to give that player the best opportunity to optimize, his overall individual performance.
Nick, in taking consideration the Melchett pick with the medical team and everything, how much of an impact, because of the fact that the relationship you might have had with Nick in Alabama gives you a better understanding and a comfort level beside the medical opinion to go ahead and take a fly on this kid, even though he probably would have been a first-round pick if he didn't have the ACL?
No, it's a good question. All the information that we gather, whomever we get it from, is important. So with each player, whether it's a medical evaluation, I mean, look, our relationship with, I would say, Coach Saban, it goes back. I mean, his relationship with Bill is well documented. I would say I have a lot of respect. And, Nick, whenever you ask him about a player, I mean, he's very honest and he has a good perspective because he's able to kind of give you a comparative view of, he's coached a lot of really good players. So, and I think you better be prepared when you talk to him. Like, you better know what the hell you're talking about. So, you don't want to waste a lot of time. So, but, when you're in a good program, they built one of the best programs in the history of college football. So they put a lot of demands on the players. They coach hard. They train hard. They play hard. So what that individual says about that particular player, like, we should listen to that information. If we don't, I mean, we're kind of being irresponsible. So it's all part of the evaluation. It's all part of the equation. Ultimately, we can take all the information we want from whomever. We have to internalize it, and then ultimately we have to make a decision. And, we're either comfortable with the decision or we're not. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.